Okay, welcome to another Frog Popstar video. I was going to try and, I've been trying to make this PvP discussion video, just going to talk a bit about the state of Ascension PvP and what's going on with it, but I just got so heated thinking about high-risk PvP, like just talking about that part, that I just decided to make a whole video on that. So it's going to be a little bit different than our usual video. I'm just going to be talking about some issues, I guess some issues that I've got with high-risk PvP, and how it's kind of, I think Ascension PvP is kind of going in the wrong direction, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. So first, I want to talk about, and by the way, this is kind of like a letter to the devs kind of thing, I'm going to post this on the Discord, like I always do with my other videos. Hopefully some of them see it. Hopefully some of you see it. And, we can argue about it in the comment section or whatever, because I guess some of these are a bit hot takes, but I think I'm right about this. But anyway, so first let's talk about high-risk leveling. High-risk leveling has been absolutely ruined. It used to be such a, used to be when you load on Ascension, really high-risk leveling was the way to do it, because you got bonus experience for being in high risk, and the bonus experience you got really offset any sort of time loss that you would that you might incur from being killed by other players. Unless you were absolutely getting camped, it was in your best interest to level in high risk. And then this, the aura of experience was added, and they buffed dungeons on top of that, and dungeon leveling just became so fast. And there used to be these things called hotspots in the open world. They still exist, but they don't really do much. They used to be far stronger than they are now. Used to give huge amounts of experience. And the way you would level in open worlds, you go from hotspot to hotspot, and when one hotspot ends, you go to another one. And if you were hotspot and high risk, there were usually other players at the hotspots. You'd fight them, and you'd get a lot of high risk fights in while you were leveling, but you'd also be leveling very fast because of the hotspot. It was a lot of fun. They eventually nerfed it to oblivion. They said the reason for it was they said it was hurting high risk leveling, people weren't fighting as much in high risk. Was they were kind of vague and weird about it, because the real reason was people were doing that instead of dungeons, and dungeon leveling is kind of where people are most likely to buy the Aura of Experience, which is a cash shop item. So I think it was kind of cutting into sales a bit, so they nerfed it to oblivion, which was a shame. I understand that perspective, why they would do that. I don't know why they said that the reason they did it was to promote high-risk PvP. But this was all over a year ago, I think. Not this wasn't on Mal'Ganis or this round. It was on the year-long round before this one, when that happened. Didn't really make any sense. Oh well. But so all these changes together have kind of made high-risk leveling pretty dead. You can maybe find some people on Hellfire Peninsula, but you're really you almost never find anyone leveling in the vanilla zones. Because that's where dungeons are just so fast compared to vanilla questing now. And a lot of people are doing BG leveling too, so they're just throwing out in high risk. And I feel like the high risk leveling was one of the more fun things to do on Ascension, and that's what I've always really enjoyed. But and it's not totally dead. You can get a little bit of it, but it's nothing. People who've been playing on Ascension for years will tell you high risk leveling is not what it used to be. But that's just leveling, okay? Leveling, it's more important on Ascension than it is on other servers, but at the end of the day, it is just leveling. The end game is what matters. So let's talk about high risk itself. I'll just get this. I'll get the flaming hot take out of the way first. I don't think dropping gear on death is actually a good mechanic. I used to be more into it than I am now. I've been playing Ascension since its beta, and they've certainly made high risk a bit more fair in some ways. But the truth is, people come on, they're like, oh wow, gear drop on death, this is going to be so sick. And then they actually experience this gear drop on death stuff, and they actually play high risk, and 9 out of 10 times they're like, oh, this actually sucks. Okay, so let's talk about why it sucks. Okay, because in essence it sounds cool. So the first reason it sucks is it tends to be pretty unfair. And, you know, while PvP and fair don't really go hand in hand, but this is especially unfair. You know, you go out and you do high risk, and you typically are just getting decimated by guilds, 5-man groups, or you've got these, I call them these 1v1 menace builds. They're these builds that really blow at everything except for terrorizing people in 1v1. And if you're not running one of these, you know, 1v1 menaces, then you don't really stand too much of a chance against the other player. And you know, at that point, like, you know, I don't know, like, you probably want to play an actual good, well-rounded build. But if you're doing that, you're not going to be able to compete with these builds. And you know, they're of the issues I've mentioned, they are like the least severe by far. But, you know, I was in high risk the other day, and I ran into some kind of bear build, and I have pretty good gear, but he had like 3 or 4 times my health. He took no damage. It was really something. And you just run into stuff like that, and, you know, if you see someone like that in a battleground, it's more reasonable because his low damage, you know, will be offset by your healers, and you know, you can target him with multiple DPS and take him down usually. But you know, in high risk, a build like that is just a menace. And sometimes you run into like kind of like healer builds in high risk, and you know, healers will eventually 1v1 almost anybody, and that is just a tragedy. But then if you leave the 1v1 zones, you get into this guild group thing, and you've got these uber geared people who, why are they even gearing in high risk? Because they are decked out already. I don't know what their angle is really, but they're running around and they kind of make those zones inhospitable unless you are also in a well-coordinated, well-geared guild group. So, and you know, it's like you know, you see like regular WoW PvP is pretty unfair, but the scenarios I just talked about are pretty ludicrous. And you know, add on top of that, like if you die, you lose, you know, a lot of gold, or you know, you lose a lot of gold with your gear. And so you know, let's talk about that too. The whole gear thing, like, well, okay, before I get at the gear thing, I actually do have a script. I know this like is going to blow people's mind that I actually like I'm holding a script when I'm doing these videos, but like my mind is so enormous and multifaceted and powerful that it's overwhelming. Okay, and that's why I jump around and such. But anyway, talk about the unfair builds. Oh yeah, like it's not all bad. Okay, like, so you know, sometimes in high risk, like, you know, like I go to high risk and I get some kills and it's like very exhilarating, but I know at the end of the day, like, the kills I'm getting are not really fair. Like, usually my gear is better or my build counters theirs or something. Like, it's pretty rare that I have these high risk fights that I feel like are like good, clean, fair fights. You know, like, or they had a mob on them, or they were already low health, or I had a mob on me, or, you know, something like that. Or you know, it's just pretty ridiculous. And that's why I think dying and losing your gear, losing a lot of gold, doesn't really make any sense, because you're being punished on top of like an already unfair situation, and it just gives people a lot of bitterness. You know, it's a lot for, you know, I'm a pretty stoic gamer, but I know other people just slam their head on the keyboard and shut the game off when that stuff happens, or they just never high risk again. Like, you ask in World Chat about high risk, and so many people are so bitter about it and never want to touch it. Which I think is also kind of led in Ascension's new direction, because, you know, when Ascension first came out, it really was a PvP server. That's what everyone was really into talking about and doing, and all the builds and stuff were focused around PvP. But now, you know, the dev team and I guess the players to an extent as well are very focused on PvE, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think PvP would have, you know, been more popular if high risk wasn't such a frustrating disaster. But anyways, let's talk about the whole idea of gearing in high risk, okay? So gearing in high risk, like by killing other players, all of their good pieces are going to be fel communed. Okay, so if you kill them, you're not going to be getting their good pieces. Okay, I see why. So you're not going to be getting their good pieces because they fel communed them. So you're killing them, you're unlikely to get good pieces. Usually you just get a bunch of junk. Maybe you get a lot of gold, or some of their gold or something. You know, that's cool, but you're not like going out and taking great pieces. And like the way it was kind of marketed, you know, like when Ascension does its like marketing videos and stuff, it'll say like, kill other players, take their gold, become kill other players, take their gear, become powerful by, you know, taking from others, be an outlaw. And it doesn't work like that. And also the whole being an outlaw thing, they pretty much eradicated outlaws because that for the Horde, for the Alliance buff is just better. So usually you see people just running that instead of being outlaws. Like it's really, you know, Booty Bay's a ghost town. You barely see any outlaws these days. There was never really that much benefit to doing it, to being one anyway, but it's a very cool mechanic that I wish they'd you know, put a little more investment into. Anyway, by the way, what do y'all think about this deep run tram loading, you know, screen, deep run tram? I don't have a video editor, so I, you know, kind of hard to play and read this damn script at the same time. But anywho, let me know what you think about the deep run tram loading screen, though. Background, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, the whole gearing thing, it just doesn't really happen. Like when I go to high risk, I'm really just farming gold, and then I leave. And if someone tries to kill me, you know, and they outgear me or whatever, like if you have cheetah form and blink, you're just never going to be caught, which is another thing. If you got cheetah form and blink, you can just be in high risk for free. So the whole, you know, gear drop on death thing is like a punishment for certain players and not for others, because you can just run these builds that can get away no matter what. It's just kind of ridiculous, really. So there's just, you know, there's too much wrong with high risk inherently for the gear drop on death thing to remain, in my opinion. And there's really no way to make it fair, which I think means the punishment for dying should be reduced. So and it's not that, like I said, like even if you didn't drop gear in high risk, it could still be an extremely frustrating, unfair experience. But it doesn't add near the amount of sting as it otherwise would. And the dropping gear thing, it's like I said, like you kill somebody, first they've got to be a similar spec to you. So like if I kill an intellect class, they do not have any gear that's worth anything to me. So all I can do is vendor it or sell it on the auction house. And Bloodforge gear for the most part is worth very little. So, you know, I took their gear, very inconvenient for them. I didn't get very much from it. Let's say, hypothetically, that I killed someone, and usually if I kill them, that means my gear's better than theirs too. So that's another reason that it's not really helping me, and it's just hurting them. So anyway, like, yeah, dropping gear on death, it's cute and all, but it's not really a great mechanic, and it keeps so many people out of high risk, like out of the actual high risk zones, not the like little piss baby high risk zones that like you just drop bag stuff or whatever. You know, never find anyone in those anyway, because, you know, in WoW, everyone's mindset is, you know, if it's not the best, it's the worst, you know, like gear mindset and stuff. So people they want to go straight to the top, which is just how the mind of a WoW player works on both live and private servers. Pretty much. So anyway, but the way those zones work should pretty much be how all of it works anyway. But so yeah, that's why I think the gear drop and death thing is just a bad idea. I think you could get a lot more players into high risk if you just didn't have it in any of the zones. So what I think should happen, so I think that so yeah, remove the gear and gold drop on death mechanic altogether, And I think you should only drop high-risk materials. And when you kill another player in high risk, they should award some sort of currency, some sort of high-risk currency. Kind of like when you kill a Felforge, you get, it's called like a cleansed soul or something. That's what a Felforge has. But high risk, you know, could be called something else. But, you know, you get some sort of currency that you can trade for, you know, cosmetic items as well as gear. And, you know, and of course when you kill them, they'll drop a chest and you can get high-risk materials out of it, but that's it. Like, you shouldn't, you know, be getting their other stuff. Anyway, so, yeah, and you could also get, you know, use these tokens to buy gear. And so let's talk about the gearing thing. So like, again, with the high risk, the gearing is so messed up because the Bloodforged gear, if it's worse than the Honor and the Arena gear, then it's worthless because of, you know, in WoW, if it's not the best, it's the worst. But so the Honor, you know, if the Bloodforged gear is worse than that gear, then it's worthless. But if it's better, then Arenas and BGs become kind of pointless, and you just would high risk instead. And that wouldn't be fair at all to the BG and the Arena players, and also having the best way to get gear be behind high risk, which is such an unfair and messed up system to begin with, it's just a disaster. So yeah, and they tried to like make Bloodforged gear better, which like it is pretty good now, but if it's actually better than the regular PvP gear, it's just going to be a mess. Okay, it's going to be a mess because then that'll be locking the best gear behind something that solo players really can't get their hands on very easily at all. But like, you know, guild groups could get very quickly, and that's not good. Like, what I already see happening in some of the high risk zones is like huge guild groups, like more than 5 players, just taking over areas, farming them to death, getting the best Bloodforged stuff out of it, and just making it, you know, inhospitable to regular players. And guilds have never really been able to do this in PvP because like BGs and Arenas have small, have small numbers of players, and Arenas typically is where the best gear is got, and the most you can have in an arena is 5 players. But, you know, like 3v3 or 2v2 are usually like the more competitive arena brackets, and, you know, guilds can't monopolize them the way they can monopolize an open world zone. So having Bloodforged gear be too good, you know, just adds another layer of big guilds only to Ascension, which Ascension already has kind of a big guilds only problem. Like, there's that Crow's Cache thing that 95% of players are never going to get to see because, you know, two guilds have absolute platoons, you know, ready to go every time one lands. So it's just kind of a mess. Kind of a mess with the whole thing. So what do I think like the gear progression should look like? I think battleground gear and high risk like Bloodforged pieces should be fairly similar in power. I think that's reasonable. And the gear you can buy with the Bloodforged tokens is just arena gear or just BG gear. You know, have it be the same sets. Maybe a recolor or something if you know you really want to get crazy, but it should just be the same sets. You know, give some balance to the 2 game modes so you can, you know, switch between them and not not have arena gear be the, you know, like not have the best in slot for a high risk open world player to be gear they can only get in arena, and you know, and vice versa. Like, if the best arena gear is got in high risk, that's also not really good because a lot of people are just here to play arena, and you shouldn't force them to do high risk if they don't really want to. But the Bloodforged, like the, you know, having some sort of currency for killing players in high risk would really solve this, okay? And that'd be another alternative to gear. So that would be how you gear. But then, like, what is the purpose of high risk? So it'd be the high risk materials. And with these tokens you get for, because this is another thing we need to talk about a little bit. If you don't know, every profession has something it makes with high risk materials, and most of those are some sort of enchant that you can put on gear. Like engineers make something that you can put on bows, and I think there's one for wands that engineers make, and it gives you some extra stats. And you know, enchanters have like special PvP enchants that they can put on. Or the enchants actually might be good for PvE too. I haven't looked at them in a while. You know, they cost like many thousands of gold typically. But you know, all the professions have something for high risk that they make, and I think that's okay. The way you get the high risk recipes, and you know, I remember when it came out, the Ascension team was like, you know, high risk and, you know, PvE players work together. Like PvE players get recipes and high risk players get high risk materials, but like really what happens is like guilds get the good recipes and keep them, and then the high risk peons go out and farm mats that aren't really worth very much, and you know, you have these enchants that almost nobody can make because you get them from raids, and you know, guilds do the raids, and you know, someone in the raid learns it, so it doesn't really appear on the auction house. So like if you're a high risk player, it's going to be a while before you can actually even get the recipe. So the recipes need to be added to the high risk vendor that I'm talking about, which that would solve this little issue. But so what PvP progression would look like is you start out doing farming mobs in high risk or doing BGs. You get gear from that. Then you move to arenas or exchanging tokens for, you know, exchanging tokens that you get from killing players in the open world for the other gear. And you could do other things like for the open world, you know, have things like kill streaks or something like that would start giving you more of these tokens if you're on a good kill streak. You know, kind of an incentive to stay alive and really try to get a big kill streak, and you know, which would just add some depth to high risk as well. You know, it needs more little things like that and make it more interesting, in my opinion. Anyway, so you would do that, and then you would get your gear, and then you would be farming the high risk mats and getting those recipes and applying the enchants and such that you get from that to your gear, and that would be kind of the path to getting your best in slot. You know, getting your character in its best in slot enchants and best in slot gear stuff. I think that'd make a lot more sense than what we have now. It'd be very easy to understand. You know, few things on Ascension are easy to understand. Like my videos are complete crap and they get so many views. Like it amazes me how many views I get, because you know, I'm really not doing very much. So I'm amazed by how many views I get, but that's because no one understands Ascension and no one ever knows what's going on here. And I think these systems that I've just suggested would make a lot of sense and be quite easy to understand, and I think they'd get more people into PvP on Ascension. And you know, I'm sure some people would, you know, I'm sure some of you have some things to say, especially since I suggested removing the gear drop on death mechanic. I'm sure the people that are just in love with the concept of that, but you know, just let me know what you think. Anyway, that's it for this video. I will see you guys next time.